God needs the devil. The Beatles needed the Rolling Stones. Even Diane Sawyer needed Katie Couric. Will you be my Katie Couric?
Wow. I feel like I'm in the Highlander.
What's the Highlander?
It's a movie.
Any good?
Very good. It won the Academy Award
Oh, for what?
for best movie ever made.
Hello and welcome to Highlander Rewatched. We have been tackling the Highlander motion picture for the last 6 weeks, and today is the final episode of the Highlander motion picture podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Keith.
This is Kyle.
This is Eamon.
And thank you so much for joining us this week. Highlander means a lot to everybody. So we had asked on Facebook and in one of our previous podcasts, why is Highlander so special to you? The original motion picture in 30 words or less, which is a tough task. So for me, Highlander is special because it presents a dark, bleak picture of immortality, all the while retaining a sense of adventure and romance, coupled with fantastic 80s music video techniques and music. That's my nutshell of what I like about it. But I really do like the fact that it's kind of bleak and dark, which I think is... Like, it doesn't it looks at like the dark side of immortality, which is something I think like a lot of vampire movies. Now I'm expanding way past 30 words. Sorry. Yeah. That's something like vampire movies like flirt with a little bit. Like, I think that's one of the draws to like everyone wants to be a vampire, like the seduction of like a Dracul character. Mm-hmm. Like, why is that character seductive? It's because he can make you immortal, and everyone wants to be immortal. And this movie fulfills that, but shows you that's not all it's cracked up to be, maybe, right. Which I think is good. I don't know. I think it's got fertile ground to explore a lot of kind of the story of the human condition, which is good. So that's my 150 word explanation. Why do you guys like Highlander in a brief description?
For me, Highlander is the game. Effectively, the genius of this show is it creates it basically creates a structure for further storytelling, and I think it really sets the stage for the show.
What do you think, Eamon? Dudes
in trench coats are cool.
There we go.
Dudes with swords are cool. And history is cool. That's it.
So, we'd like to read some responses from the listeners out there. I will start off. Paul H. tells us, Highlander tells the classic story of good versus evil, but adds the moral layers of immortality and the fragility of love and life. And don't forget the music.
Very important part of this, which I don't know if a remake could really capture. Like, they're not going to have the same Queen songs in there, are they?
I've heard rumors that they want to stay away from that, and I can appreciate the fact that they don't want to like tread too much on old territory. But
sure,
that's the problem when you deal with like iconic movies like this and iconic actors and actresses. Like, it's sometimes hard to replace those things because they're really what make it. So.
Yeah.
Kim E points out that it's all about Connor McLeod's laugh.
Oddly enough, that Connor McLeod and Raiden have the same laugh. What's that all about?
I wonder how that happened.
And they both yell fatality all the time.
Connor said that every time he cut somebody's head off. Get over here! And he chops Vasil's head off.
Holly Mack says... I think what makes Highlander the movie so special is the storyline, not to mention the music and the magic of the what if. What if you could live forever? Very good, Holly.
Julia S. writes, the trench coat of mysticism and the sneakers of power. The story's all in the flashbacks.
Yeah, those sneakers are amazing. We haven't talked about the sneakers enough. Like
his white tennis sneakers.
Yeah, I mean, like, imagine like a suit, like the superhero or just hero suit of armor in any sort of like movie. Like, every character or every hero in a movie kind of has like some element they put on, and it's like for Connor McLeod, it is like a rumpled trench coat and dirty tennis shoes. It's and like jeans. I've got my armor like on, like it's like ugh.
Yeah, well, he really mixes it up in the final fight with that leather jacket.
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna go out with style. Like I won't even shave today. You might as well wear sweatpants.
Zach O writes, it's the source material for the greatest Aqua Teen Hunger Force episode of all time.
Dominic S. writes, it's something tragic and wonderful about being almost immortal. And unlike vampires, these are humans. Learning about being human while fighting for ages with a rock and roll attitude.
Chris L. writes, it really captures the idea of living forever as both a blessing and a curse. You live many lives, but lose everyone who is near and dear to your heart.
Norman L. writes in, the original Highlander movie is special because it asked, and continues to ask, a very poignant question, cloaked in the MTV fantasy stylization of the 1980s. Immortality. At what price?
Jill B. writes, everyone sold their performances. The characters were real to me. Heather, Ramirez, Connor, the Kurgan, Brenda, they were true. The Kurgan was actually dangerous. We want to thank everybody that wrote in to answer the question, why is Highlander so special to you in 30 words or less? Thanks so much for your submissions. They were really great. And now on to the exciting conclusion of our Highlander the Motion Picture podcast. So, we're on the Silvercup Studios. Somehow, Connor, does Kurgan tell him where he is? Or he's just like, find me?
I don't know.
Who knows? That's like,
Yeah,
that's
I
one of
can't
those
remember.
movie magic things.
Yep.
But
I never questioned whether or not he knew.
who knows? Either way, they've got some magnetism anyway, so I'm sure Connor could find him. So,
Brenda's
Connor,
like tied up.
yeah, there's some. I love the shot when they reveal, like, it's like you see the back end of the Silvercup sign. It's like all in full focus, which means like the depth of field is all the same. Like the stuff in the foreground is in focus, midground and in the background is all the same focus, which is really cool. So you see Connor like arrive on the rooftop. It's really dramatic. I think it's cool. Again, this is a very.
How do you put together a shot like that where all three are in focus?
It depends. Sometimes, depending on the movie, they'll like use models to actually like put the foreground, like something that's supposed to be in the background. They'll just put it closer and use like a model or a painting. That way, the camera picks it up as being closer. But otherwise, they'll use it's called like shift focus. Or tilt shift, excuse me. And so they end up having like essentially two different lenses. When the camera moves, they like adjust the focus so you can see two different things. Sometimes, usually there's like a line. Like if you look at like older movies or even modern movies, like maybe there'll be a character in the foreground and one in the background, but there's like a pillar in the middle of the scene, and they use that as like the focus point. And so like the pillar will be slightly out of focus, and it's because they're using two different lenses to capture the foreground and the background.
So that both are in focus.
Right. But yeah, it's a cool effect, and yeah, they do it here. So this is a very like operatic, climactic fight scene, just like we had in the castle before.
Yeah. This is a really cool sequence. I mean,
I noticed that they use Freddie Mercury's voice in the soundtrack a little bit here. I don't know if anyone noticed that. Like, there's like weird whooshing sounds when Connor arrives, and they've got Freddie Mercury. I think it's a kind of magic, like the lyrics from that, like, but they're all distorted and like whooshing around in the background, which I thought was pretty cool.
There's like this kind of almost King Kong kind of reference here because Brenda is kind of chained up to the Silvercup sign, like elevated, and when Connor goes to rescue her, he is ambushed by the Kurgan. Did I say King Kong? I should have said Donkey Kong.
Donkey. Donkey. Sorry.
So then the fight breaks out, and this is the second unforced error on like a downward chop we see from Connor McLeod. Like just like with Facile, where he accidentally like stabs the pipe and gets like blasted in the face with steam. He once again just like accidentally hits the scaffolding while they're fighting and gets housed as a result.
Yeah.
and the Kurgan does this weird like spin move at one point where he chops down the whole sign.
Yeah, he's like got a lightsaber or something.
Yeah.
Like he's just hacking away at the sign.
And just twirling. He's doing ballet and hacking this thing to pieces.
Like he's like, oh, you started it, so I guess I'll finish it.
Right.
And he just chops the whole sign down. And then that also makes the water tower fall over.
Yeah, there's a water tower on the roof that collapses and floods the whole roof.
Right.
So in the midst of this fight, and I couldn't tell, is this supposed to be a callback? Connor gets like knocked down and disappears underwater. And I was like, oh, like we've seen this happen before because he like disappears for a while. And it's like, oh, we know Connor can like survive, like be underwater.
Yeah.
Although like the thing that's weird is like the lip on this roof is like a foot tall. So it's like there's a foot of water.
Yeah.
And like everybody is disappearing with
Yeah.
their full bodies. Like
The Kurgan does this weird spin underwater.
I have no
love
idea
it.
what it is, but it's awesome.
He's like, like he's going down a toilet.
Right.
Like he's getting flushed down the toilet.
He is.
But then the sign falls and Brenda gets like unroped. She gets dislodged from the sign or
Right.
something.
Was this supposed to be some kind of odd callback to the fact that they can breathe underwater?
that's
Is
what I
that
thought it
what's-
was. Because they both end up underwater, and it's like,
And
but
it's
we
not
don't
really-
see anything else, and it's just like, I guess they can be underwater.
It's not really played up. I would have liked to see them either fight underwater or have it be.
Hold
like,
on, imagine that playing out. Imagine
Oh,
this movie
God.
where there's an underwater sword fight.
Not like an underwater sword fight, but like some
Struggling
like, at
or
least, like,
something.
even
Yeah.
just a shot of them struggling beneath the waves.
Yeah.
Or like it's just something.
Right.
Because it was so striking. They made it such a point to reveal that Connor could breathe underwater. In fact, you see him like giggling to himself underwater about how he can breathe underwater. And then they both are underwater in the climactic fight of the thing.
Yeah.
I will bet you that there was something planned for, like, I feel like that must have been a setup for this. But
It didn't stick out to me. as
We'll have to-
being
we'll ask
strange.
Russell.
Yeah.
Russ Mack.
Russ Mack. So, I mean, this is a pretty cool fight. I don't know. I like it so far.
I do too. It's a crazy like combo of like, I guess they filmed some stuff on location.
Yeah.
Then they had like a replica of the Silvercup Studios in London. They apparently they wanted to do some like reshoots on this. Like they wanted to take some second takes, close ups, that sort of stuff. But when they tipped over the water tower and like flooded the set, I guess they thought it was going to be like drain out, and it didn't. So they went back to like do some more shoots, and like the entire set I think was like completely unusable.
Yikes.
Yeah.
There's one part where the Silvercup S is falling over, and you can see the wires pulling it down. And you know, I know it's a kind of a low budget cult movie, but I thought that was funny.
Yeah. I remember when I had watched that, I never thought of that as like someone pulling the wire down. I just always assumed there were cables on the
right.
on either side of the sign, just like for stability. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I never read too deep into that wire.
There will be some other cables that we're going to talk about
will be.
later, but
So after
Electric suspenders.
that's
so
right.
oh, we haven't really mentioned there is like electricity everywhere right now.
everywhere.
Like
Which is cool because the Silvercup building, it's like almost like the signs are generating the electricity as they hit the water and do all
Right.
this.
And there's crazy sparks. Like every hit they take, like there's electricity in the water coming from their swords. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So after the water tower explodes, they end up tumbling through like a skylight
Right.
into like
Just
what
a
is
big room.
like a big
Yeah.
warehousey sort of room with a big window. And I really like this as a like a setting for
It's pretty awesome.
like it's like again like in the script I guess it was supposed to be on the Statue of Liberty, which is really iconic, but I kind of like this like stark imagery. Like it's just an empty room, it's just the two of them, it's backlit, so it's like more silhouetted stuff. Like I think this has got a lot of like style to it, which is cool.
yeah.
Like a lot of style. It's kind of funny that they transition from a more complicated set to a less complicated set. Like there's this trajectory towards simplicity. Like even comparing it to like the Kurgan Ramirez fight, that's like a complicated fight scene where all the stuff is exploding during the fight and all this stuff's going on. The final confrontation is stark.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, it's almost like they're fighting in a desert.
Right. And actually, good that you mentioned a desert. So it's interesting, like the music kicks in when they start fighting on the roof. And this is, it's the Michael Kamen score. Allegedly, he wrote this final, like, climactic fight scene cue in 24 hours, I think, which is, like, insane. That's a lot of music to write in such a short amount of time.
Also, I don't really feel like the music fits what's happening on the screen.
I was going to ask how you feel about the music during this entire climactic scene.
I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not a huge fan of the stuff on the rooftop. I like the cues when they're in the warehousey sort of section.
That's
really,
when
I feel the opposite way.
Really?
Yeah,
I thought the entire I was at least on board when they're on the roof. Like I'm not gonna I don't think it was as good as what's come before it, but I was at least like in it. Once they get into the warehouse, I just feel like the music is like wrong in some way. Like it's not syncing up with what I'm seeing.
It's like
it
really-
doesn't capture the emotions I'm
Yeah.
feeling. Certainly, like it feels like it's the climax of a different movie.
Interesting.
Well, it's really upbeat and heroic. Like you're supposed to be feeling victorious, but Connor hasn't like turn the tables yet.
Right.
Yeah, like Connor's still getting his ass kicked for
Yeah.
a lot of this, but the music is telling me he's already won.
Right.
Huh.
Right.
I remember.
Very
I thought that
much
came
so.
later.
Yeah.
I thought when he got the upper hand, it changed, but maybe not.
But he doesn't really and truly get the upper hand in this fight until very close to the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is consistent with like his entire character and
Yeah.
everything like that. But the music is triumphant from
Yeah.
more or less the minute they get into the warehouse.
Huh.
Yep.
Interesting.
It's
It
odd.
stuck
It
out
just-
to me.
It doesn't
Yeah.
feel right.
I wonder if like Queen music would have been better suited here.
My sense was a yes. But even I think it should have been Queen music and then transition.
Or it could have been no music.
Well, that's what, when you mentioned like a desert, I was just going to bring this up. So when they're fighting on the roof, there is the Michael Kamen score. It's this very like operatic music, similar to what we saw when he fought Fazil in the beginning, or when the Kurgan and Ramirez fought in the castle. But once they fall through the skylight, they do this great, and a lot of movies do this. Star Wars does it every once in a while. Like, they cut the music out completely. So, like, not only do they go from this complicated set to this very, like, stark, empty room, but, like, you are left now with no music. And I think that's a really great effect. Like, all you hear is the clashing of their swords, and it's just bleak and stark. It's just the two of them. And then eventually the music kind of kicks back in, which I think is pretty cool. So, the music is the swords, I guess,
Yeah.
in this sense, which is neat.
So then we have they're fighting. Connor's kind of losing. Then Brenda steps in.
Yeah.
Yes, this is interesting. So, like, they both fall, but Connor seems worse for wear. It's feeding into this notion that the Kurgan's the strongest. The Kurgan seems to recover quicker.
Yeah, he gets
and-
right up.
Whereas Connor's, like, get in the process of getting up, but doesn't seem as ready to jump into the fight. But in the third pipe scene of this movie,
Right.
Yeah.
Brenda comes in and whacks him with a pipe, which also, how'd she get down there? She didn't fall through that glass. 'Cause
No,
if
they
she
show
did-
her trying to get through a door at one point.
Yeah.
And finds them, I guess.
Yep.
I guess so. So yes, there's 75% of the fight scenes in this have a pipe in it.
Yeah.
Pipe man begins.
And then Connor's like,
Pipe lander.
yeah, Pipelander. Connor's like, what kept you?
It's like it's an awful one-liner, but again, it's like this rascally sort of like jokester sort of guy. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about Connor, like, ever.
Yeah.
Again, he should be like we keep bringing up Han Solo, or a more modern reference like what's it, Star Killer from is that his name? Guardians of the Galaxy.
Star-Lord.
Star-Lord?
That's what I said.
It is not.
Well, all right.
Yeah,
Same Star Vader. What's the guy's
Chris
name?
Pratt. How would Chris Pratt be as the new Highlander?
Ooh, too
Interesting.
baby-faced.
A little bit.
He is a bit baby faced, but
We should talk about that more. But like
That
again,
should-
like the version of Connor McLeod this movie paints is so all over the map. I think
Yeah.
like you could do somebody like him. Like I remember a number of years ago, Ryan Reynolds was attached to this project,
Ugh.
and I remember a lot of people were like, "Ugh, like no way, no how." And I remember I was one of those people. I was like, "Oh, that's no good." But then watching this movie again and seeing how like rascally and funny Connor seems to be, I was like, "Oh, like actually."
maybe when you have any glimpse of what his character is.
Right, but it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I can see like if whoever's doing the casting was like in touch with that portion of the character, it's like, oh, I can see where Ryan Reynolds like made it through this process to be like, oh yeah, like that's a version, like the funny smartass character here.
Yeah.
But it could also be many other, like the dark, weird, foreboding.
Broody
Like,
Connor,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So, anyway,
And at this point in the fight, the Kurgan, his eyes become really round and dark. It's very
awesome.
weird.
I love it. They
Yeah.
give him like black contacts, and this is, I guess, where like the music kicks back in.
Yeah.
It becomes like heroic, and Connor starts getting an upper hand. I guess he cuts the Kurgan in the belly, and the Kurgan's eyes turn black, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Though, just to back up for a second to talk about this Pipe Man Begins moment, she hits him with a pipe
In the
right?
back, right.
In the back. He, speaking to this tranquility, keeping your cool moment, rather than finishing what he came here to do, he like turns all of his attention to her and like loses his cool. Somehow Connor manages to get up,
Right.
run, like at some point like his sword gets thrown away.
Oh, it gets kicked across the room.
He runs like 40 feet.
Well, I think he teleports because Ramirez taught him how to do
Oh, yeah, he has his
He
teleporting
teleports
powers.
across
Yeah.
the room, grabs the sword, teleports all the way back, and then he's doing like this massive overhand swing on her. And he just sticks his katana out and like it's a lightsaber, just stops it. Like somehow it's like, you know what? Your sword is there, and then his sword keeps going and cuts her in twain. Just saying.
Yeah.
Brenda's dead.
Yeah.
So we get, I guess, kind of the
dead.
again. I think the shooting in this scene is really neat.
Yeah, this is a cool fight.
This is a technique that Russell, I think he pioneered this technique. Like the camera's zipping all over the place, and it was like some sort of like dolly system. Like they would put the camera on a track, but like without a stand. Like it was on the ground almost. And I think they had it like on a cord, like a zip cord, and they would zip it across the floor. So the camera's like whipping back and forth on this track, and I think it gives this like really grandiose view of the fight. I don't know. I think it's a cool music video technique they use.
So Connor wins. He
Yes.
chops off the Kurgan's head.
So he slits his neck, and you're not sure what's going on at first, and then
right.
suddenly, I guess the Kurgan's head like slides off.
Yeah.
And then they cut to like light exploding from his neck, and like a chicken with his head cut off.
Yeah.
The Kurgan is like reaching over his
Yeah.
head. He's like, "Oh, what happened?
What happened?
What happened?"
Doesn't he do like one last motion with his sword or
Yeah.
something? Yeah.
It's
And-
strange.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then that's it for Kurgi. Kurgi's gone.
So then we get
What's the Kurgan's real name?
Kurg.
Kurgy Burgies.
Because he signs as Victor Kruger. I don't
Victor
assume
Kruger.
that's his real name.
His real name is Kurtgin.
Oh boy.
Good. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So should we play the clip of Connor getting the quickening?
Yes.
I guess so.
All right.
We're gonna need like a visual clip of this too.
Yeah,
'cause
we'll
it's-
definitely post this on Facebook. But we're gonna put
It's
this
a visual assault.
right.
Yes.
All right. So, what is going on here?
There's all these crazy. I actually like this animation.
Uh-huh.
These crazy drawings of weird demons and dragons grabbing his head and like sniffing him and doing all sorts of crazy shit. I don't know what's going on here. It's all this hand drawn, kooky animation. Connor, well, he says the famous line, "There can be only one,"
and that sets off this whole thing. Like the windows all explode.
it like zooms in on him,
Yeah.
and then boom, 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 and then he flies up in the air. You can see the wires.
And there's a story that I guess like in an original version of this, Russell McKay envisioned
Him fighting like a dragon.
he would fight a dragon. Like
Yeah.
this is like not the final boss battle. Like
Right.
there's the super boss battle at the end, and then they visualized it this way. And I've heard things that they put in this animation to hide the wires,
Oh,
but it didn't really work.
It did the opposite.
yeah.
Exactly.
It made it look like he has electric suspenders.
yeah.
It's very silly, frankly.
So one of the things that happens in this quickening, like this is like all the quickenings is over the top as they have been that we've seen so far. This one is that like on crack. Like
Yeah.
this is so crazy and,
And
over
it's like
the top.
zooming in on his eye, like over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah,
Like,
so-
It's not even crack. It's like crocodile or some drug,
Crocodile.
or like some sci-fi drug we've never heard of.
crocodile on crack.
Yeah. So one thing we're gonna have to put a picture of on Facebook is it like zooms in on his eye over and
Yeah.
over again. And I guess it's like I don't know what the point of this is. Like I don't know if it's going through like all the souls that he's like ingested. Like I don't know how to put this. He's
eating them.
He's eating them, right? Like, but at some point his head explodes, and it
Yeah.
happens for one frame on film, and you have to go through and pause it to see it. But they have like a
head.
like it looks like it's made of Play-Doh.
It looks like he looks like a Ken doll head.
Yes, like they have sculpted a Christopher Lambert head out of Play-Doh and then blown it to smithereens.
Yep.
It's amazing. I don't know. Everyone should pause it.
It's insane. Also, like seeing I agree that this is kind of like a cool bit of animation, but seeing it seems like a negative thing. Seeing this happen seems like an awful thing
yeah.
is being inflicted on
Yeah,
another
like,
human being. Like this is terrible.
It's
Well,
all
they're
like
all
devil
scary
imagery.
monsters,
Yeah.
like engulfing him.
He's being
Yeah.
inhabited by a million skulls and a dragon.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem like these things are like fleeing either. Like
No.
they're getting him. Like yeah, I don't know what
Winning
this is
over him
Yeah.
in some way.
It's very strange.
Thinking about it in the context of what you had mentioned of how do you interpret the phrase "there can be only one," is interesting. It's like this unity. It's that like all the immortals are like actually vying to be combined into a single person in some way.
Right.
That there's like they're trying to be combined into like one perfect creature.
Perfect Christopher Lambert.
When I think perfection, I think Christopher Lambert.
You know, the guy with the swords.
Yeah.
I might be misremembering because it's been a while since we've read this, but Eamon, you had found an article in, what was the mag? It was an old sci-fi. Starlog.
Yeah.
And I remember there was an interview with some of the people involved in Highlander from 1986. And clearly this interview was done like while they were still in post-production. And one of their special effects, like the coordinators or the head of special effects or whatever, was talking about this scene and about how crazy this was going to be. It's going to be awesome. And he was talking about
like 20 immortal heads.
Right. So he had built these like masks that were like of ice, he said. Like that was the plan. And like there were different faces. And it was supposed to be all the people that had gone before Connor. And I guess they were going to blast them with heat. And so you would see like each of these faces emerge out of ice.
Yeah.
And it sounded like this crazy, like very like what's the word I'm looking for? Ambitious sort of special effect. Obviously that's not in the movie at all.
No.
So that didn't work.
I mean, they got one head.
And then they got one head made out of Play-Doh.
Oh yeah, so you missed the ice wall of faces.
Can we just talk about for a minute the things he's saying?
Yes, let's please.
I think this scene would be 1,000 times more effective if he just kept his fucking mouth shut, because he's saying some stupid shit.
So what's he say?
The quickening, it absorbs me, or what is it?
It overpowers me. That also feeds into the notion that this is like bad. Like he's using
you get
something.
overpowered by something not good.
He's not himself anymore. He's being overpowered by this thing.
Mm-hmm. And then I know everything.
I am everything.
Maybe it's just his delivery of these lines, but I laughed when I heard these.
I don't know that there's a way to deliver that to make it seem plausible. But it is this like weird kind of unity Buddhist kind of thing.
And again, we don't know what's going on.
Right.
Like again, like and either does he, I guess, right? Like they from the beginning of this movie, they have not set up what this is. So as the audience, we're just like, huh, like, okay, like it's a little bit more of the same, but we're not, it seems to be bigger or something's different. It looks kind of the same to what was before, except the cartoons stuff. Yeah. It's like like cartoons from Fantasia are flying around him or whatever. But
so the dragon, should we talk about that for a second? Because the Kurgan's the dragon. What's the deal with this thing?
I guess, I mean, it feels like if Russell had envisioned there being like a final boss fight at the end, I guess this all makes sense.
Connor's already learned the ability to double jump, so now he can defeat the boss.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this all makes sense. And also I give them a lot of props for like setting up that dragon imagery, like throughout. Like this isn't something that was just tacked on to the end. It's like, oh, and then he becomes a dragon and they fight. It's like, huh? Like what? Like if you look back through the movie, it's like, no, there's like, he's in snakeskin armor. Like he's got the tattoo. Like there's a lot of dragon stuff. So I give them props for that, but I'm not exactly sure what the deal is with that. Like what it means. Especially like what did dragons mean like mythologically? Like the imagery they use for the Kurgan's dragon, like the tattoo on the side of his head is like a East Asian dragon. And aren't Asian dragons like benevolent and like those are not destructive creatures. Like there's two kinds of dragons in mythology. Like there's dragons from Asia, and those are good. Like they're signs of luck or prosperity or wealth or something. And then there's the like Anglo-European version of a dragon, and they're the ones always guarding the treasure in a cave and taking sacrifices. And then they always seem to represent like your inner desires. That's why like you've always got to like the hero's journey is always like to the cave. Like it's about facing yourself. Like that's why Luke goes into a cave and Return of the Jedi.
Empire Strikes.
Sorry guys. Sorry guys. Sorry nerds. I blew it.
At one point, it took me being sent that image of like the Play-Doh head to realize what it was, because in my notes I was like, is that like a bust of Julius Caesar? Was what I'd written. It looked like a marble like Roman bust to me the first time I saw this. But then Connor goes on to explain the prize, and that's very odd.
So, all right. So after this scene, Connor collapses on
the ground,
and Brenda comforts him.
And we should note the windows do shatter.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
That part of this whole thing is cool as hell.
They're like big explosions. Like in the shadow too.
I was just gonna say, like, if you like the last 5 minutes of this movie, check out the last 5 minutes of the Shadow because it's identical.
Yeah, it is.
Because he's like in a mirror room and everything explodes.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it is.
So then we cut to presumably the Scottish Highlands, and there's another scene that I feel like is set up oddly. And Kyle, I didn't take note of the flashbacks here. Like you mentioned that the last flashback we have was the Boston Common thing, which was a while ago. And also, it's not in the Highlands. Like, this scene, I feel like they're trying to do a fake out here. And this would work better if we were always kind of flashing back to Scotland in a way. Like, we're just accustomed to flashing back to Scotland in a certain time period.
Flashing back means 1500 Scotland.
Exactly.
That is the meaning of flashbacks.
Maybe. Because, like, we're set up, and it's like, you clearly know just from the imagery the movie set up, it's like, we're in Scotland. And it's like, this must be, like, presumably this must be a flashback. But then, like, a fighter jet flies overhead. And it's like, oh, fake out. It's like, this isn't then, it's now.
Right.
Which I think is a great, like, setup. Like, movies, like, Back to the Future does this. It's like, oh, what year are we in? Like, we're not sure. Like, Marty looks around, and then, like, suddenly a flying car goes overhead. It's like, like, we know when we are now.
We're last year. That's still depressing me.
Well,
sorry, Back to the Future 2. You're now Back to the Past 2.
So then Connor and Brenda are, like, in the hillside. And also, it should be noted, this is also reshot. So they did not. I am really curious what the first version of the scene was, but it was apparently drastically different.
Huh.
I'm not sure if all this voiceover stuff was present.
Yeah.
I know all the costuming is different because Christopher Lambert is wearing Bill Panzer's shirt in this scene. And I guess they didn't feel like the ending was working, so they went back and I think they actually had to fly everybody back to Scotland to shoot this. Like, that's how big of a change they needed to make.
Brenda looked different in this scene and kind of weird.
That could be why. It's probably filmed maybe maybe even a couple months later, when they cut the movie together. So I'm super curious if anyone knows what this ending was supposed to be like. I'd be curious. But Connor explains what's going on.
Kind of.
So he can, like, read people's minds?
Yeah, she's like, well, I want, like, what's going on? And, like, he's like, well, you're wondering if you can love me or not. And he's like, you can. Like, what?
So, like, it almost seems, so there's two sides to this prize that are weird and seem like they're developing two separate themes. So we've got this whole naturalistic element where he can read, like, tap into the powers of animals and become one with nature. And it seems like the prize, in one sense, is the ability to do that with humans.
Right.
So this kind of existing ability that immortals have is enlarged, and that's the prize. And that seems like phenomenally powerful. But then there's this separate notion that the prize is the ability to grow old and die and live as a mortal.
Right.
Which seems like, and have children, which is, like, thematically a separate, unique prize. It's like the prize is something that regular people already have. Like, they are fighting to become like everyone else.
Right.
Is the fundamental, like, cherry at the end of this thing. Like, the kiss at the end of the rainbow is this thing that's completely ordinary. And that's those are two interesting, but I think divergent themes. Like, I don't feel like the prize should be both of those things. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much about it.
Do we want to listen to the end here?
Yeah.
So, this is where it all began. Can you tell me about the prize?
It's like a whirlwind in my head. But if I concentrate, I know what people are thinking all over the world.
This feels like ADR to me.
Presidents.
Yeah.
Because it is.
Diplomats. Scientists.
I mean, there's nobody
I can
on
help
screen
them understand
speaking.
each other.
It's just a voiceover.
Is this also recorded in a bathroom?
You're thinking whether or not you can love me. You can.
Or not.
Just like you.
Redundant.
I can love and have children. Live and grow old. You never prepared me for that, you Spanish peacock.
Like, is he talking to her? Is he talking to
Patience, Highlander. You have done well.
So is this like Obi-Wan Kenobi? Are they actually having a conversation?
Good question.
No, maybe.
I don't know. It's possible in the context of this movie that, like, I mean, he does absorb people's souls.
Yeah, but that's the other thing. Like Kurgan absorbed Ramirez, he absorbed Kurgan. So I guess distributive property is now absorbed
so
Ramirez.
Connor kissed Ramirez?
Yes.
Ew!
It's beautiful, Keith.
All right.
Well, I wonder if the Kurgan can like pop in at any time he wants and talk to Connor.
Every once in a while, he just hears "Mom."
He's got the two little things on his shoulders, little cartoon Devil and Angel.
Imagine how disappointed the Kurgan would be if he won the prize.
Right.
I just had to hear Christopher Lambert go for all eternity.
And then like, hey, I'm mortal now. I can't harass people anymore with impunity.
This is an odd. All right. I really like the bait and switch of what the prize is. Like, I like that conceptually. It's like, this prize is, like, everyone's after this, and everyone maybe has their conception of what the prize is. Like, it's maybe understood it's like being ultimate power, control, who knows what. And it ends up being like a simplistic sort of like inner peace sort of thing. And again, I think this plays into this, like, there can be only one, like, it's about like unity, finding your like spirit something, like, you know what I mean, a bunch of gobbledy spiritual gook. I like that bait and switch. And again, like, I agree, Eamon, like, well, yeah, what would the Kurgan have done with this? Or is the prize unique to the person?
That's what I was gonna say. Is this what the Kurgan would have received if he had won the prize?
Right.
Or would he have gotten something different?
Like an even bigger sword.
With more moving parts.
That's right.
He would have actually become a dragon.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose the Kurgan could use this knowledge to his benefit.
Sure.
Right, and let's not pretend that the ability to read minds isn't phenomenally powerful.
Right.
Sure.
But this is definitely like sort of like a anticlimax. Like, it's this guy isn't like crowned king of the world at the end of this. Like, no one knows who
He's
he
not
is.
Prince of the universe.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like, yeah, no one's aware of his existence. Like, he kind of still operates like the quiet hero.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like that twist a lot.
Yeah.
And I think they could make more out of it if they tried to define the prize through the characters more, and then had it not be what those characters defined it as. Like, if the Kurgan was out for a goal, like if he was like, I want to rule the world, like, this is what I want. And then at the end we get to see, hey, that's not what this prize was. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not given the opposite of whatever this thing is to like help define it. Like, we're just always given like, who knows what the prize is? And then it ends up being this. And you're like, as a viewer, you're like, I guess it's this. Like,
yeah.
But if you had like maybe Connor espouse like what he thought the prize, like, no, the prize is going to be this. And if the Kurgan said, no, the prize is this, like, I want to, you know, rule over mankind. And maybe Castigar had a view of it, or Ramirez had a view. Like, either way, it honestly could even still just have been the Kurgan's viewpoint of what the prize is. I think it would have made this switch, this little trick at the end, a little more powerful. But
I am everything. So then this movie ends on like a really awkward kiss. I just don't feel like these actors have chemistry, really.
Nope.
yeah.
And this like really seals it. Like, they concealed it in like their love scene by having it all be like in the dark.
Ugh.
So you just get like a silhouetted nipple kiss.
Well, we know Connor loves his nips.
Yeah. But now it's like in the light of day. This just doesn't feel like it works.
Nope.
I know you feel like you're wondering, can you love me? The answer is,
If you feel like it, if I'm worth it,
am I worth it? I still have all the same doubts.
Yeah.
So why don't we let's take a little bit of a break, and we're gonna come back and kind of give our final thoughts on the movie and just do kind of a big wrap up, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Are you telling us or telling our listeners?
I was not sure, so I was just saying it with conviction and confidence. Hey, Rewatchers, this is Keith. Make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and iTunes, or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. That's right. Each and every week we come up with brand new Highlander rewatch content for your listening pleasure. So make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on iTunes, Stitcher, or any major podcasting app. All right, guys. So we have finished watching Highlander the motion picture. This has
Yay.
been quite the ride.
Yeah. Way more episodes out of this than I think even we thought possible.
Yes, this is now our 7th episode. I know I expected 3 max, maybe
Max.
2. Max. We found a lot to talk about.
Well, there's a lot in this movie. It's pretty dense.
Yeah. I don't know. It had been a little while since I've seen this movie, actually, because I feel like I watched the sequels more, because I always kept going back to try to give them another chance. Be like, oh, let me see this again. Like, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was. So I kind of was not watching the original Highlander for a long time, because in my mind, it was like, oh, no, I like that one. Like, I don't need to see it again. But it was nice to go back and see it, and I appreciated it more than maybe I ever have before.
Yeah, and especially a lot of the technical aspects of this movie, which we went over in detail. You really need to be paying kind of close attention to see some of the subtler touches in the way this movie is shot, which is pretty brilliant, actually.
I think I enjoy the kind of grounded, realistic elements of this movie, whereas a lot of the sequel material is more science fiction-y. I don't know if that helps Highlander overall. I mean, I think that's part of the appeal of the TV show. It's more fantasy than science fiction. And I think the noir element really kind of helps it.
And it's pretty grounded throughout. Like, the only thing this movie really asks you to accept is that they're, like, immortal and, like, can take a beating.
Right.
That's really all you need to suspend disbelief on to kind of take this ride with them. Some of the weirder stuff, like, is unessential. Like, you don't need to know that he can mind meld with a stag to make it through this movie. Whereas the later movies, like, you have to accept a lot to get into it.
Yeah, or breathe underwater. Ugh.
Yeah, that was pretty extraneous, though.
Yeah. Also, yeah, this movie actually almost is a little better for not explaining too much. Like, it just presents stuff and you're like, oh, okay. As you get deeper into the mythology, they try to explain stuff and then it starts creating contradictions and it's like, wait, how does this work? But it just kind of shows you stuff and it's like, oh, I guess that's what it is. So,
and that's like an Achilles heel to a lot of fantasy. Like, it's like Star Wars syndrome where, like, they had to explain where the Force comes from. It's like, oh, it's like midi-chlorians. It's not really magic. It's cells within cells. It's my favorite
part of the series, Kyle.
Yeah, the midi-chlorians.
The midi-chlorians.
Are you serious or kidding?
Absolutely. That's the best part of the prequels.
What?
No. No, Jar Jar Binks is the best part.
Agreed. Misa, agree. What? Misa, agrisa. There we go.
Oh, no.
Where's the other thing? That's Lambert's favorite part of the character, which confuses me, is that he's like a grounded, real hero with emotions, and he's not a superhero, which, you know, as far as I can tell from the sequels, what he likes about the character isn't extended as much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which is, I find weird, because he was a driving force behind a lot of those sequels, as far as I'm aware. But I'm not an expert at this point on those sequels, so, you know.
We'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, tune in 8 months and Eamon will be an expert on those sequels.
That's right.
So here's a good question. Would you guys, this is a 2-parter, and I don't know if the first part is a fair question.
Uh-oh.
Is this a good movie?
Yes.
Okay. Eamon, what do you think?
Yeah.
I will agree. I think this is a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
It's got some odd bits. Like, it's far from a perfect movie, but it is a good movie.
Yeah.
And it's very well made.
I think so too. And you know what's interesting? So as preparation for kind of us watching this, I was reading a lot of movie reviews from the time, and we'll put some links to these on Facebook. But it's surprising how negative this movie was received, and I think a lot of that is the fault of the U.S. distributor, and they made all these weird cuts that, like, it's definitely an inferior movie with a lot of those scenes missing.
Especially like things like the betrayal when he gets driven from his village. Like, they need to set up relationships in order to knock them down. Otherwise, there's no sting.
And the whole opening scene, which sets up like
no interstitials.
Yeah,
that's insane.
No good.
To refresh our readers' memories of this, during the opening wrestling scene, there are these interstitial cuts back to an ancient battlefield, and that's like the first hint that you get that McLeod's immortal. In the American release, they cut that out.
No bueno.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also interesting, like, if you read a lot of the old reviews, like, I know Gene Siskel had a lot of problems with this. The reviewer for the, like, Philadelphia Inquirer, I want to say the London Times, they all had this problem that the movie was hyper violent. Did you guys think this movie is, like, hyper violent?
Hyper? No. I mean, I don't have much context for it. I can't really remember what was out at the same time. I mean, let's be fair. There's a scene where, you know, the Kurgan's throat gets cut and like blood spills out.
Right.
Like there are people's torsos getting cut and blood spilling out. It's a lot more violent than the TV show, obviously,
Right.
but I wouldn't say it's hyper violent. But,
Yeah.
you know, I also watch like anime and, you know, horror movies. So my perception might be a little.
Yeah, Gene Siskel said he was like his stomach turned and he wanted to like leave the theater.
That I don't get.
Which seems crazy.
Yeah.
Also, this movie was made in '86, filmed in '85. Like movies like Terminator.
Yeah, Terminator is the one I was comparing this to in my head.
As a hard R movie.
Yeah.
Like
well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
And again, I haven't read Gene Siskel's reviews of those movies. I mean, maybe he just has a dislike for violence in film.
Right.
So he might have not liked those.
I mean, there's a part where somebody gets picked up off the ground on the tip of a
Right.
sword and thrown. And right before that, a guy gets shot with a machine gun and flies across an alleyway. So,
Yeah.
And then right before that, somebody's head got cut off. So, I mean, objectively, this is a violent movie.
Yeah.
But
It is violent, and I think part of it's fairly gritty violence. It's not very glamorous. It's not part of like fast cuts and like super action, even though we did discuss that there are a lot of cuts in these fight scenes, but it's not like glanced over. You kind of dwell on the violence in this movie for a solid beat. Like you have moments to kind of appreciate how kind of intense some of the stuff that happens is.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess
But it's like artfully shot, I guess. It's not gratuitous, I guess. I don't know. Like there aren't guts falling out.
Right.
Or like,
Yeah, it's weird.
no,
I think
it's not like a slasher movie.
Yeah.
but
yeah.
And movies today are so crazy violent. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
even TV is pretty crazy violent. Like this through our lens, I feel like is not violent. I mean, it is, but like it's like, oh, whatever. Like
Yeah, but
I've seen far worse than this.
Yeah, I feel like this movie could air like in prime time now
Yeah.
without being
Yeah.
edited.
Yeah.
Like
Well, there are samurai movies from the 70s that are like regarded as classic films that are more violent than this movie. So I don't know.
Yeah. Part 2 of my question that I was going to ask is, would you recommend this movie to other people to see? Especially if they had no idea about Highlander or anything like that.
yes, but not without qualification.
What are those qualifications?
Well, like I'd have to know. I'd recommend it to people who I knew their taste in movies a little bit. I'd recommend this to anyone who's a fantasy fan, anyone who likes metal or like rock in any way, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's into kind of like noir pieces. I'd be very comfortable recommending that to anyone who fits into those categories. That being said, I don't think this movie is for everyone. You also have to be willing to stomach a bit of confusion,
Right.
as we've learned going through this. If you don't have like a Highlander backdrop as you see this movie, there are bits that are, I think, just objectively kind of confusing to a first-time viewer.
Yeah, I'd kind of follow that. I mean, I think any like genre movie fan would probably like this, especially action. I feel like movies these days, it's kind of compartmentalized, and this definitely feels like kind of a niche movie or something. It's not like the Avengers or something where everybody goes to see them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like, if you like The Hobbit, you're not necessarily going to like this movie.
Right.
Like, even though they're both, in quotes,
Wait,
fantasy.
people like The Hobbit?
The first one was okay.
It's okay.
The second and third ones were. I'm going to go on record saying the third Hobbit movie is one of my least favorite movies that I've ever spent that much time seeing.
Wow.
I detested that movie.
Did you guys see the video of Benedict Cumberbatch doing motion capture to play Smaug the Dragon?
They actually had him do it?
They had him. Everybody listening to this, go on YouTube, search Benedict Cumberbatch Smaug motion capture or whatever. You guys have to see this video. He's like on his hands and knees, going like roar and stuff like that. And I'm like, there are these people called animators who can actually animate this fucking dragon because humans, guess what? They're not shaped like dragons.
Wait, hang on, rewind. We're not shaped like dragons?
No.
Shit.
Unfortunately, I wish we were. But anyway, that was an aside. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's good. I feel like I'd say this is a good like cult movie.
Totally.
What about you?
Oh, I'm on board. I would definitely. I'm with you, Kyle. That like this is a movie not for everybody, but if you're into like action, if you're into action movies, period, I think you'll probably dig this.
Yeah.
Especially like movies from the '80s. If you dig that kind of this vibe.
And it's got Sean Connery in it. I mean, people like him, or they used to anyway.
Also, if anyone
got
like
balance.
if anyone's familiar with like Highlander references, which I think are most people, like there can be only one is something you hear a lot.
It's in the lexicon.
Yeah,
like
I feel like that's something that may have become popular enough that it's almost unmoored from this movie.
Yeah, it's transcended
Definitely.
like its roots. But yeah, I think if you're familiar with that phrase, it would be like, oh, go check out like the source material. It's worth it. Like,
and then you might be like, holy shit, this is what that's from.
right?
Yeah.
Oy.
Like when I saw Casablanca for the first time when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, this is what all those Looney Tunes were talking about.
So do you guys have any like favorite moments, and then maybe worst like the your least favorite moments of this movie or elements?
Yeah, I think this is fairly easy for me, at least. Number one is definitely the entire opening sequence, basically from the first notes of Queen into the transition into Scotland. Awesome. That entire opening to this movie is gripping, shot really well, great action beat, an amazing transition into the Highlands. Thumbs up all around.
Amy, what's your favorite part or element of this movie?
I mean, I'd have to piggyback off of that. The beginning of this movie's amazing. And also the whole sequence with Ramirez training.
That's a great training montage. Totally.
McLeod. Yeah, that's really good.
Strictly the montage, or are we talking about that entire...
the fish falling out his gill?
Yeah.
Not the fish.
I'm only in it for the fish, guys.
But picking it up after that, after Fish threw him throwing Ramirez's sword off of the top of a mountain, and then they have to go down and find it.
You just like to imagine the search.
Yeah. They should make a whole spin-off movie just about that. Or like spin-off novels. There's a spin-off novel
about the search for the sword.
I'm looking for that sword.
I think my favorite scene in this movie, I think, is the wine, or excuse me, not the wine scene, the brandy scene.
Oh, that's a great little monologue.
Yeah, it's a great monologue. I think that captures a lot of what I personally like about kind of the Highlander mythology. Like it feels, I don't know, there's a little heartbreak in it. It's got a romanticism, imagining the past. I don't know, I feel like it's got a lot kind of going on in that scene. Like it sums up a lot about what the movie's about. Besides like it's got all this action sort of stuff in it too, but like I feel like the core of the movie could maybe be summarized in that little scene.
I think that might be my favorite scene in the movie if there wasn't some like kind of jury-rigged problem with the center of that scene of just why is he there?
Yeah.
Because I even like the beats of him being like, nice place, Brenda, when he finds the gun.
Yeah,
and,
that's
like,
really
that
funny.
whole thing.
Yeah.
But then like he knows John Polito is there and like baits are into lying to him. It was all kind of preordained, him storming out. And then he does it anyway. There's just like something about that scene. It's on shifting sands.
That scene, it's a good bit of writing. It works for us because we know he's immortal. If you were on a date with this guy and he uncorks the drink and gives that speech, I'd be like, all right, shut the fuck up. Let's drink this stuff. All right. Like, I think it was weird, but it is like a nice bit of writing and it's a cool idea.
Totally.
So it works for us, the viewer, and that's the magic of cinema.
It is. So we've said our favorite parts. What are our least favorite parts of this movie?
Keith, I know you can guess mine.
I guess it's Boston Commons.
Ding, 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 ding.
There it is.
I feel like I've said my piece.
You've said a lot about how
I've said
terrible
my
this
piece
scene
on
is.
Boston Commons. I'll leave it at that.
I'm kind of in that same boat. I really don't like that flashback. Also, the underutilization of Castigar. I don't like that about this movie.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my least favorite part is probably Brenda / the police. Through no fault of Roxanne Hart's performance or anything. I think she's fine in the movie, but for her to be such a big part of the storyline, I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities and it just kind of doesn't really go anywhere. We're given kind of a female that you would think has a lot of agency, but kind of by the end is maybe a damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It doesn't really go anywhere. And I think the relationship could be more interesting, and it's not.
They just don't sell the relationship.
Yeah.
Like,
There's no chemistry. There is no chemistry, I think, between the two of those people.
No.
Yeah.
There isn't. There's
Like, you'd think they would have done a chemistry test, right?
Yeah.
Who else did they turn down for this part? And they were like, yeah, the two of you really have the best vibes of this list of people.
Well, you know what's crazy about that too is like, yeah, like you'd think they'd get two people in front of the camera to see how it kind of like played out. They said they didn't realize Christopher Lambert didn't speak English till like he arrived on set. So like they hired him like sight unseen, like just knowing that he was in a big movie, Greystoke, and was like kind of a big star at the time. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, we'll go with him. Like, because he agreed. So,
like, I at least get that maybe they committed to him early, but why not do some more?
and they definitely committed to her late, because I think she was maybe their second choice or third choice. Like, she came on kind of late in production. Like, they were already kind of ready to go. She was like the last person cast.
Why not switch her and Beatty Edney? They had chemistry.
They definitely did. Also, there's rumors that they maybe had a little
fling-a-ding.
maybe a little fling on the side.
Ooh. Well, Lambert had like kind of a reputation for being a bit of a womanizer.
Ooh.
It's funny that apparently he has like all this success with women in real life, when in the movie the whole time we're just like, really? Him?
Yeah.
Him? But like I have no problem believing that in real life he like is a lady killer. But somehow in the movie we're just like, really?
Yeah. Another highlight is Clancy Brown's performance.
Yeah, I think he comes across as like one of the top movie villains ever.
Really?
I'd
It's
say
really
so.
good.
I mean,
I mean-
like, if Darth Vader's number one, arguably, he's I don't know, maybe even top 10. Like, his performance as a villain is like crazy over the top. Like, I don't know, it's great.
It is pretty amazing. The thing that he really deserves like an extra nod for, and I don't know, I think this was alluded to in that Gregory Wyden interview that we had played a clip from. The character itself is like fairly one-dimensional. There's really not much going on here. Like, it's literally all on Clancy Brown's back to make it compelling and worthwhile.
And I mean, he obviously had some displeasure with the role, but he made it work, baby.
I mean, he really did. Like, no reservation there.
Yep.
So, what's everyone's best theory on why Amon Facile is doing backflips in that garage?
My theory is it looks cool.
I think it's an intimidation technique. and he's showing McCloud how badass he is. He's like, check it, bro. And he just starts flipping.
Yo, how many backflips can you do?
Yeah.
Answer, none. I don't think McCloud could do any backflips.
So a listener on Facebook had a theory, and he made it sound like this is like accepted canon in the extended universe, that Amon Facile is flipping to look under the cars to see where McCloud is hiding. What do we think about that?
I think there are much easier ways to look under a car. Like, I don't know, just stepping back far enough and leaning down. That's my first theory.
Or like he could put his sword under the car and look in the reflection of the blade. Or his sunglasses that he dropped.
That's right.
McCloud.
It's pretty crazy. We have just watched Highlander for about a bajillion times, and so we thought we'd do a little trivia game here. So Kyle and Eamon, you're going to go head to head in some
Okay.
Highlander.
Going down.
Yeah, so get ready. All right, Eamon.
It's Anne like Danky Kane.
All right, Eamon. What year did Highlander come out?
1986.
All right, that is correct. Oh,
Ding,
let me
ding, 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 ding.
let me get a scorecard here. Eamon, you have 1 point.
Yes.
All right, Kyle. What section of Madison Square Garden is Connor seated in?
E23.
Sorry, it is 214. No points.
Shit.
Oh.
Eamon,
Yes.
what is Connor McLeod's current alias in the film?
Russell Nash.
That is correct.
Oh, yes.
2 points for you. Very good. Kyle, on what date does Kurgan kill Castigear?
Ooh. Let's go with November 6th, 1985.
I'm sorry, it is April 1st, 1985. You can see that on the newspaper, dated the next day, April 2nd, 1985. No points for you.
How did I miss that? I don't even know.
Eamon,
Yes.
in the film, the Kurgan hires a lady of the evening. What is her name?
I believe it is Candy.
That is correct. You are up to 3 points.
Oh my
Just
God.
to take a second here, let's do a little recap. We have Eamon with 3 points. And Kyle, you still have 0 points at this time.
Oh, damn it. I want to protest that last question. I thought her name was Gomper Stomper.
Is that a kind of candy?
Yeah, by Willy Wonka.
Ooh.
Kyle, when Connor moves into his New York City apartment, what is the third alias he uses?
Well, I don't know if he had a New York City apartment when he used his third alias. but I'm going to go with...
We're speaking of his current address.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go with Conrad McGillicuddy II.
I'm sorry, it is Alfred Nicholson. No points for you.
How did I miss that?
And let's do one more question here.
Is he related to Jack Nicholson?
He is now.
Eamon, the question to you is, what kind of scotch does Connor order in the bar?
Oh, I think that's a double Glenmorangie.
That is correct, and you get 2 points for identifying the name of the scotch and the order. Very good. You have 5 points. Kyle, I'm sorry, you still have 0 points. All right, last question. This could tie up the game. Maybe this one's worth a couple more points. Don't worry. All right.
You haven't decided yet.
I'm sorry. Well, listen, I feel bad. Eamon clearly is doing better. He has 5 points. You have 0. So for this one, I'm going to give you a multiple choice question. That way it's a little easier.
Perfect.
When Detective Frank Moran visits the hot dog vendor carries the following variety of sodas. A, Hawaiian Punch, Pepsi, and Sprite. B, Sprite, Hawaiian Punch, Diet Coke. And C, Sprite, Diet Pepsi, and Hawaiian Punch. A, B, or C? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
I'm going with B.
B is correct.
What? Boom! Suck it.
No! That one was worth a whopping 2 points. So to tally these scores, Eamon, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, and Kyle has 1, 2 points. Now, I find it a little disappointing. I was hoping the scores would be a little bit more fairly balanced.
I only pay attention to Hawaiian Punch.
It is clear one of you really likes Highlander and the other one is a little on the subject. So I'd like to thank you so much for participating and for paying attention so closely in the movie Eamon. Kyle, maybe in Highlander 2, you'll actually try.
So, Keith, does this movie pass the Bechdel test?
Well, good question, Eamon. So on this podcast, we often talk about the roles of women in the Highlander universe, and typically it comes up a little short, which is a bummer. But the Bechdel test, if people are unaware, is kind of a shorthand way to see if a movie kind of has strong female characters. So it's got 3 rules, and let's maybe go over these 3 and see if this movie passes. And this was created actually by an American cartoonist, Alison Bechdel. So the first rule, this movie has to have at least 2 named female characters in it.
It does.
Check. It does. It does. We've got, who do we got? We've got Heather and we've got Brenda. Are there any other ones besides those 2? I think that's it.
Kate,
and Candy.
Yeah.
Kate and Candy.
That's 4, baby.
That's 4. Very good.
Oh, and Rachel, right?
Oh, Rachel. That's right. I said, who's Rachel?
Rachel! That's Batman. Rachel Dawes.
Oh, that's right. Question 2. Who talk to each other?
Yes. Yeah. Brenda and Rachel talk to one another.
Brenda and Rachel do talk to each other.
They do.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, baby.
I had written down, no, they don't, because I actually forgot Rachel was a character.
Sweet Rachel.
Sweet, sweet Rachel.
And then number 3, do they talk about something other than a man? No, they don't talk about anything else other than Mac Daddy himself.
Daddy
this
Mac.
movie does not pass the test. It does come close for actually having a number of female characters.
Yeah. They don't do much,
This is true.
but they there.
So hopefully one day when they reboot Highlander, we'll get to see a strong female protagonist. This movie we can of course see as just an action adventure fantasy movie. But during the course of this, we did talk a lot about other ways you could view this movie. So there were 3 main ones, and we'll just maybe talk about them a little bit. I had mentioned that this movie can have possibly some gay undertones. What do you guys think about looking at this movie through that lens?
There's definitely a lot of gay imagery in it. I mean, even just the rough sketch of this movie. At this point, all male group secret society meets in the dark of night to stab each other with swords.
Yeah.
Like the imagery is kind of baked into it. There are a lot of images that don't need to be there that they add in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the quickening itself is so sexual. We've talked about that.
Definitely.
And yeah.
And they make it extra sexual in this, like even compared to the way it is in the TV show.
Yeah, I think there's a real strong case for viewing it with these elements in mind, but I don't think there's necessarily a good through line. Like, I don't think this is entirely like a gay allegory or anything, but
No.
I think the inclusion of Russell McKay as the director, who
Yeah.
we know has like included,
Experience with this imagery.
yeah, exactly. It definitely, and knowing like what the original script was and what was kind of added, like I think it becomes very apparent the things that are added into this movie to like that you could view as homosexual, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. And I think you just said something that I think is applicable to any reading of this, which is just in terms of like not having a clear through line necessarily. Just that I feel like a lot of the images in this movie is imagery for its own sake. Like maybe it's connected or that there's a theme to the imagery, but a lot of it is highly stylized
Right.
and not necessarily plot driven or plot connected.
I mean, you could say there's not a good through line with the narrative itself. Like, I mean, we've talked about like, well, what is the prize? Like, there's these elements of oneness and peace and, you know, balance, all these sort of things.
Balance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But like, I never find that there's a good through line of that. Like, it's all there, and it maybe existed stronger in a previous version, but I'm not really sure. So even with the main narrative and story itself, there's not a strong through line of everything. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of look at this. I think. So Kyle, you had mentioned a lot of Cold War kind of imagery, and you know this movie's definitely a product of its time. So want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, those are kind of two, I think, related concepts that are kind of woven throughout this thing, because there's a lot of, you know, the movie I kept thinking of when seeing this was The Warriors, right? Because you get this guy who basically causes this massive gang war in New York. This is The Warriors I'm talking about, in case you missed the plot of Highlander. And when like asked to confront it, when they confront this villain at the end, he just does it for like kicks. It's just about chaos for its own sake, and it's like this weird madness of the era, especially in New York, because that's another gritty New York movie. I think we see that here. Like that's what the Kurgan really represents. He's just this malevolent force of like destruction and death that just kind of rages through this period, but with no end game.
Yeah.
And there's purpose.
And there's one very specific Cold War like image on the like the quote unquote gun nuts shirt. He's got like missiles, and it's like, I don't know, it's like, I forget what it exactly says. It's something like "Take this, Moscow," or
it's like an anti-communist.
It's like an anti-communist shirt. So that's put front and center at some point.
And like just the fact that the Kurgans, like from this like Russian steppes, basically, he's represents this like hyper masculine, hyper violent perception of what at the time would have been like our enemy in the East. You know, that could just be a factor of something you had mentioned earlier, which is just in a given time, your villains tend to mirror your country's real life enemies, and it leads to a lot of like caricatures of people in movies. But I think that there's at least something to it.
When we talk about balance, like as you said, the Kurgan kind of represents this malevolence and this, you know, evil for evil's sake, whereas Mac kind of represents, you know, sitting and moping around. So there's not really like, McLeod doesn't represent anything in this movie.
I think that's a weak part of this movie too. Like,
Yeah.
he should really be the opposite of
and he's kind
Clancy
of
Brown's character.
Yeah, but he's also kind of set up as like this Han Solo-esque character in some scenes, just where he's like, you know, doing one-liners and is little rascally, like we talked about. But then it's just like at other times he's just sitting there like mopey.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think the interview with Wyden, I think the portrayal of Mac in general is probably pretty consistent from what Wyden's original vision was. Because you know how he talks about the Kurgan just has like this darkness. He just wants to finish this thing with our guy. And there's just this notion of being sick of life. And that's kind of how I felt about Mac the entire time.
Yeah.
Because Mac is just this guy, he's just this poor mope who's like still alive and just can't get on with it, but just like wants to be left in peace. Like he's just tired of this. Like, come on, just leave me alone.
Right.
Totally.
And I feel like that is thematically linked to this older version of the script, which is why maybe he doesn't represent much. Like,
Could be, yeah.
at least in this wider good versus evil struggle. Because
Yeah.
as I said, like on episode 1, not really a hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully at some point we'll get to talk to some of the writers and kind of figure if we can break down how this script kind of got to the finished product. I think would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of drafts here, and it all became this kind of collage of different elements from different people.
And just still thinking about that balance line.
Yeah.
The entire Cold War was about balance of powers and maintaining a delicate balance in a nuclear fueled world. In any case. More just kind of images.
Yeah.
That are,
and the last kind of set of images is we talked about a Christian interpretation of this movie. And to me, that one actually comes through the strongest for me.
I'd agree with that.
Like that one has almost a whole through line.
Yeah.
That also is maybe a little bit more woven into the narrative. Like I feel like the homosexual stuff is not quite as woven in. There's a lot of imagery. I think the closest we get to it actually being woven into the mythology is maybe the you can't get married, you can't have kids, those sort of things kind of are part of the story, but otherwise it's mostly imagery. But I think the Christian themes come through pretty strong. There's lots of crosses. We get Connor referenced as like God, like you fight with God on your side, and there's Connor.
There's the bit where like when he wins the prize, he's literally suspended in the air with his arms out,
Right.
like he's kind of having this crucifixion moment.
Yeah, the Kurgan is represented by a dragon, and there's a lot of dragon
serpent.
or a serpent, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of dragon imagery in the Bible, especially in relation to like Revelation, like the end of days, which the Kurgan Ramirez says like if the Kurgan wins, like there will be an eternity of darkness, which sounds like the end of days to me from the Bible, and that's represented by a dragon. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll try to throw up maybe a list or two on Facebook of kind of all this evidence we could quote unquote say of what we've found in these movies for these interpretations if people think that's interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of cool ways to look at Highlander. And again, if you haven't thought about it in maybe a deeper way, I think it's kind of fun to see that this surface level, maybe action adventure, gritty movie has kind of stuff going on underneath, which is intentional and thoughtful, I think. So, which is pretty cool.
If you haven't watched the movie recently, look for some of these things. You know, pop your DVD in and look out for it because I think it's interesting. I think it adds something to it.
So, any final thoughts that you guys want to share with our listeners?
Sure. Watching this again, it's been a while. It reminded me of how much I love this movie. It's really great. It was fun to revisit it. But it also reminded me how much I really enjoyed the TV show. I'm really excited to get back into season 2 of the series. For me personally, as much as I like the movie and like the concept, I find that this concept in general works, like lives better as a television series, because this movie introduces us to so many like interesting facets of this mythology and doesn't really get to explore them as much as like the TV show can because of the format.
Yeah.
Eamon?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I, rewatched this movie. I used to kind of
titular.
You're glad you Highlander rewatched?
Wait, what?
That's the name of our show.
Oh, you're right. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
I am glad I Highlander rewatched this movie because I kind of used to have not a great opinion of this movie. I'll be honest. I liked the TV show more, and I thought this movie was kind of hokey, and I am very happy to see that I've been proven wrong. Also, kind of weird thing that I just thought about. It reminded me how much I like Sean Connery.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like,
he's super charming in this.
He's amazing in this movie. And I'm a big James Bond fan. He's kind of playing a different character. He's not really James Bondy in this. He's a lot more likable and like fatherly, whereas James Bond's kind of cutthroat. So I was just like, oh yeah, Sean Connery's actually really an awesome actor, despite some of his personal viewpoints, which we won't talk about here. But yeah, very glad to watch this again.
Yeah, rewatching this was awesome. I also developed a much larger appreciation for this movie seeing it again. One thing that really struck me about this that had never quite sunk in before is the difference in the way Duncan and also Connor are portrayed in the TV show versus the way our in quotes hero is portrayed here. When they show Connor in The Gathering, he like hunts evil immortals. Like he is a superhero. That is his shtick. And they kind of present Duncan the same way. Like Duncan's like a little bit retired, but like his thing is going around literally hunting down bad guys. Whereas here he's just like this noir protagonist at the end of his rope. And I think that actually could be a really compelling character in a TV show. Again, this does fit better in a TV show because you just need more time to flesh this stuff out. Like it's too dense. Like there's too many moving parts to like knock this out in a 100-minute movie. But I think I could follow when Connor is at his most rascally, but he's still this kind of somewhat self-interested little curmudgeon-y noir kind of hero. Like I feel like you could follow that guy for a lot of episodes and get a lot of good content out of it. Big takeaway, there's a noir, like a hard noir Highlander out there that could be really cool.
As part of our rewatching of this, we've done a lot of kind of, in between takes, talked about what a reboot might be like of this movie. And so we're just going to tease this a little bit now. We're going to have a contest next season for season 2 of the series to pitch us your Highlander reboot. And we're going to take part in this as well. We're going to come up with what would amount to be like a 1-page treatment of what we think a Highlander reboot would look like. So make sure to tune in next season, and we're going to give more details about what that contest is going to look like. But I'm really excited to hear everybody's thoughts on what a new Highlander could be.
Yeah. And we 3 won't be eligible for the prize.
The prize, of course. So thank you, everybody.
Guys, give me the price.
Thanks everybody out there for sticking with us through this whole thing. Again, this is longer than we ever dreamed it would be. We had about, I think you've stuck through about 7 hours of Highlander talk. It's longer than the movie itself.
Yep.
By 3 times.
So if you enjoyed this podcast, I think you'll definitely enjoy our series 2 when we talk about the series. Make sure to tune in and subscribe on Facebook, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can tune in to season 2, which is going to start up pretty soon. We're really excited for that. So once again, thanks a lot for listening.
We're going to be taking a week off, but you can join us the week after that for the season premiere of season 2 of the TV show, The Watchers. You can guess who's introduced in that episode.
Uatu? The Marvel Comics character?
Yes, that's it.
That's it. You
precisely.
nailed it.
Thanks again for watching. I've been one of your rewatchers. I'm Keith.
This is Kyle.
This is Eamon.
Bye.
Thanks for taking this ride with us.
Bye-bye.
Interesting.
What was that?